Whilst there are many different types of mountain bike designed for different types of riding, the components you choose to put on your bike actually make a big difference to how that bike rides. So in this video, we'll take a look at tailoring your bike to you, the type of riding you do, by choosing the correct bar, stem and seat post. So first, let's start with handlebars. Here we've got a cross-country 29er carbon fibre super lightweight bike, and here we've got a long travel trail bike or an enduro bike. So on the more aggressive style of riding, bars are definitely wider. With downhill, for years people went wider and wider in search of more control, up to about 800 millimeters, and these Pro Tharsis trail bars actually do come in at 800 mils. Personally, I like to run a slightly narrower bar, so down to about 760 for downhill and 750 for trail riding. And that does come down to my personal preference. Also, sort of shoulder width will make a big difference to how comfortable you feel with wider bars. You'll also see that on these trail bars, you do have some rise to these bars. So that is 20 millimeters compared to the cross-country bars where they're much more flat. There's 5mm rise on those. That's all about bringing the weight further back on the bike. And I'll talk a bit more about bar height in a minute. Something else you don't actually see is inside these bars, there's more carbon layup to make them a stronger bar. So moving back to the cross-country bike, this has actually got a 5mm rise on this bar, and this is the Pro Tharsis cross-country bar. This is 720mm wide, but they are available in 740 and 700. So for cross-country, sort of the ride characteristics matter a little bit less. There's less technical riding and the weight saving is much more important. So these are a lighter bar. So both of these handlebars are 31.8mm diameter, which I think is fair to say that's the most common standard you'll find now on bars compared to the older 25.4 and the newer 35mm bars. And that's all about trying to get the correct balance between strength and flex in those bars. But it's fair to say that the thinner walled, larger diameter bars are stronger from an engineering standpoint. So picking the right rise bars and setting your bar height is really important to the ride characteristics of your bike. You see on the cross-country bike, it's much lower, it's slightly accentuated because the ground's not level, but you can just compare the two there. That really brings the weight further forward on a cross-country bike where you spend much more time climbing and you need to keep that weight on the front wheel. So picking the right rise bar makes a big difference. We've got 5mm compared to 20mm here, but that's not the be all and end all. You can still play around with spaces underneath the stem. On my trail bike here, I've probably got 25mm worth of spaces underneath that stem to bring the bars up. On the cross-country bike, I guess that's more like 10, but I've also got one on the top, so I can play around moving them up and down, trying to really find that correct bar height. Something like the trail bike, if I'm going and riding a lot of downhill on it, maybe going to the Alps for a week, again, I could put even more spaces underneath that stem just to bring that weight that little bit further back on the bike. Okay, so stem length works with your bar height and width to set your hand position on the bike. And as a general rule, the longer stems again suit cross-country better to bring that weight further forward, so it's balanced more neutrally on the bike for going up and down hills. This is a Pro Tharsis 90mm stem with a -6° angle, so again that brings the bar down. And that's available in 10mm jumps from 80 up to 120. And that's all about perfecting the reach, and that also obviously works with your frame size as well. So bigger frames, you might actually want to run a shorter stem to get that bar positioned correctly. Moving on to the trail bike, the average I would say is probably 50mm for downhill and enduro long travel trail bikes. This is actually a 45mm stem, and that's available in 35 and 55. Really, those shorter stems make it a much more direct, quicker steering bike. You just sort of turn your hands and the bars really move. With a cross-country stem, it does feel like your bars swing around that bit more. So in conclusion on the stem lengths, the longer stem gives you a much roomier bike generally, which makes it more comfortable to pedal for long periods of time and also keeps that weight on that front tyre for climbing. Whereas the shorter stem gives you a much more responsive ride and also brings that weight back further on the bike, great for going downhill. So you can see on the cross-country bike with the long stem and the low bars, the centre of gravity is really in the middle of the bike, and that can be moved forward or rear depending on the trail. Whilst on the enduro bike with a 45mm stem, while seated, again, the centre of gravity is pretty central to the middle of the bike. But when you start riding into the downhills, it's much easier to get to the back of the bike. And all that is doing is really maintaining that centre of gravity in the middle of the bike. Because as the front wheel drops, you need to move your hips back just to compensate. Now the final piece of the puzzle when it comes to rider position on the bike is the saddle position, and that is determined by the seat post. Now for the most part, most cross-country riders still use fixed seat posts like this Pro Tharsis carbon post here, and the saddle height is set for the greatest pedalling efficiency. That does affect comfort though, and does make it much harder to move around on the bike, especially over the rear for descending. You can move that saddle front or rear, sliding the rails along in that post for comfort, so less reach or more reach. Whilst fixed seat posts are light, well, very light in the case of this carbon fibre one coming at 199 grams, the disadvantages are of course when you move around on the bike. But for many riders, cross-country riders, where downhill speed isn't the be-all and end-all, they will take that compromise. But for many trail riders, they love the option of a dropper seat post like this Pro Kodiak dropper seat post, 120 millimeters of infinite adjust travel. So the maximum height is obviously set the same, so for pedaling efficiency, then you've got the option to drop all the way into that post. Quite often it's nice just to drop a little bit so you can pedal still pretty efficiently, and you can get up and move around on the bike when you need to, and then drop the full 120 for a downhill section. It's got internally routed cables, as most frames now are set up to do, so it keeps it nice and neat, but the payoff is this seat post weighs about 300 grams more. Okay, so whilst there are obvious trends for, say, cross-country versus enduro, long stems, short stems, it's definitely always worth thinking about trying to tailor that bike perfectly. So, like we said, there are stem options and bar options in all sorts of different varieties, and you try and get that bike set up perfectly for you. If you want to see more videos, click on the GMN logo to subscribe if you haven't done already. And for a couple of really similar videos, click up there for how to adjust your bar height, and down there for stem length explained. Give us a thumbs up if you like this video.